Harakiri, set in 1630 feudal Japan. An elder samurai, and now beggar, visits a feudal lord looking to commit harakiri, which by the samurai code is the ultimate honourable death and reprieve from shame. But all is not as it seems. Ooh. So you've never seen this film before, have you, Phil?
No, I've never even heard of this film before, to be honest.
I completely had forgotten about this movie, to the point where I could only remember that I loved it, and sort of vaguely it was about samurais. It just has such a modern feel about it. Like, you know when people talk about Citizen Kane was so influential? And it was. It did a lot of... You look at it today and you'd be shocked at a film from the 1940s having so many kind of like modern storytelling techniques and that sort of thing. But there's a sharpness to even things like the editing in Harakiri that is just amazing. It plays with non-linear storytelling, like a lot of Japanese movies from that era. But it does it in a way, like if you look at Western movies from this time period, you'll have a flashback, but usually it's done where someone's like reading a letter, or they're saying, "Oh, I remember it just like it was yesterday. And then it fades like, and then it goes to the thing. Whereas this it's so slick at times with the way it will suddenly snap back to a flashback, or when it will cut back to the present day. But it cuts back a lot in an interesting way, where a lot of the time it doesn't reveal the action. To you. And although this movie definitely has really good action elements, it's a different sort of action. It's nearly intentionally doesn't show you the action at points. There might be the biggest battle of the entire movie. Most of it takes place where you can only hear it. Yeah. And you're looking at the master of the dojo, master of the house in the movie, and he's sitting down and he's just contemplating while you hear this crazy battle going on outside. It's really interesting, the choices it makes. And also it steers away from the Grand Master Samurai who can take out 100 men with ease and not even get sweaty. Its action and its violence is really grounded and shocking. Like, some of the violence is shocking for a movie in this day and age, how realistically it's depicted.
Yeah, I was thinking that about the scene at the end when you can hear it like going off outside, like very stylistically done, the swords clashing. And I was thinking, like, it's taken so long to get to this point, and then we're just looking at this guy just peacefully like sitting down in a room, and I just thought, for a second, did they run out of money or something? Like, do you know what I mean? But then I realised, I thought about it after the film, in the grand scheme of things, it makes perfect sense that it's like this. It's more about, instead of the full-blown action, it's more about the characters and how we got there, rather than the massive set piece, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. And this is not an action film. The action it does have, they don't want it to be so much exciting and exhilarating as beautiful, and always secondary to the plot and the characters. And this is a movie really foremost and foremost about themes, and the themes it's exploring is the idea of honour and integrity and what that means, and ideology. The ideology of the samurai who's the thing about the samurai is they were worthy of the incredible reputation and mystique they have about them. One of the most interesting war subcultures ever. If you're a military history buff, it's fascinating.
Oh yeah.
Especially but But this was peace times, and I'm sure this movie, as much as it was about feudal times Japan, it was also about the modern day, where, you know, Japan coming out of World War II and the period from that, you know, that was a time of hyper nationalism, like where the military code of ethics handed down from the samurai ages, but now turned into this modern version of it for the sake of modern warfare, was ingrained in everything. And part of the reason, interestingly, was that when Japan was modernizing, the samurai culture was very strong still, but kind of becoming more and more obsolete, making less and less sense. Kind of like, you know, you look at, why the hell do the guards that guard Buckingham Palace wear those silly hats still?
Yeah.
It's kind of becoming a bit like that, but in more ways. And they needed a place for them to go, essentially, because the warfare didn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
So they stuck them into areas of bureaucracy.
Really?
And that's part of that kind of verba being taken out of a military setting and put into a bureaucratic setting is part of the reason why Japan has such an absurdly demanding work-life setup today. Like, you hear about, you know, part of the reason they have such a low birth rate is apparently because so few people end up in relationships because they spend all their time working. Like, it's a real problem over in Japan.
Like, in Japan, apparently, like businessmen just sleep on the floor, like in the middle of train stations. And like here, you'd be like, is this guy drunk? But there, it's like seen as a massive thing of honour.
Yeah.
So they work like, I don't know, if we work 37.5 hours a week, they could easily work 60.
Yeah, and it's also just the whole culture within it, even if you forget the amount of hours, is just crazy. Say that having never visited Japan. But anyway, the whole topic of honour is explored in the very opening scene when a beggar walks into the dojo and he expresses that he wants to commit Harakiri. Essentially, commit suicide in a form of honour because his life has become destitute, he's poor, and he doesn't want to live in this shame anymore. And we see the guy he's speaking to goes back to his other little samurai friends, and they're basically like, they tell the audience that this has been happening a lot and it's become a trend where people come in saying they want to commit Harakiri because a guy genuinely did it a few years ago.
Yeah.
Genuinely wanted to die, and they believed him, and they actually said, "Oh, come in, we'll give you a job because we really respect your how much
initiative, honour, how much
you hold your integrity
Yeah.
to the samurai codes and ethics." And people hear this story, so they start coming and faking it, and clans don't know what to do, so they just start giving him money. So they recognise this beggar as that's what his plan is. So they tell him a story from a few months ago where a man called, I can't remember his name, where a young Japanese man came in trying the same trick. They recognised it. They even inspected the blades he brought in, and they turned out to be made of bamboo.
Yeah.
So they were like, this dick, let's fucking teach him a lesson and show everyone else that you can't do this thing. You can't come over on us and try and hustle us. So they tell him, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
And they force him against his will, because at this point he's trying to leave. He's saying, let me just go home for 2 days and think this over, or go set things in order, I'll be back. But they make him do it, and not just that, they make him do it with his bamboo swords. Now, explaining Harakiri, it's basically a process where... Sorry, were you about to?
Yeah, I was about to say, Declan, like, we need to explain
the go ahead.
process. So it's a process of where the samurai gets... Is it their actual samurai sword or a smaller blade?
So the samurais are occasionally referred to as two-sword men or two soldiers, because basically they have their large katana that everyone knows from Kill Bill and movies, and their slightly smaller sword.
So the samurai,
they take the smaller sword.
It's a two-man job essentially. The process, they get someone from the council or within the dojo to stand above them, and the process is to get the small sword and literally stab yourself and drag it across until essentially you disembowel yourself, your guts come out, And obviously, when that happens, instead of you dying like a slow death, you've done the part. The second adopted counsellor guy just whacks off your head, and it's job done. So that is the process.
And it was historically usually done when, say, a samurai had lost a battle.
Yeah.
And it was a way of, with dignity, bowing out, essentially.
But that obviously, if you're fighting like a war, that makes no sense because one of your soldiers had survived, and you might go into another battle, and you're just losing more soldiers by them killing themselves.
Well, the absurdity of like that is essentially what this movie is about. But just finishing that last note was the young man ends up having to do it with his bamboo sword in absolute brutal fashion. It takes him so long to die. He can't stab himself with it, so in the end, he puts it on the floor and just sort of jumps onto it.
Do you think that's do you think it's possible to do it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And then he has his head cut off, and that's the end of it. So they tell the beggar this story, hoping to scare him off. But he's like, no, sounds good. He's very casual about it, and he's very serious about it. So they're like, sweet, let's get him in. So they bring him in to the centre where they're going to perform it. And he says, I've heard of some very honourable men in this dojo. May I request my second being the man who stands behind you ready to lop your head off? And they say, yeah, sure. And he picks a certain name, and they think, oh, that guy's ill.
Yeah,
he's like, is he? And he's
pulled a sickie from his head.
Yeah, he's pulled a sickie.
Where's Alan?
And so he's like, so the head guy is a bit like, all right, well, he's not here, so let's just get on with it. And he's like, but I've really had my heart set on him. Come on, can you not go see if he's all right? He can't be that ill. So they're like, all right. So they send a guy off to look for him. And he says, well, since we're waiting, may as well, tell you a bit about myself, tell you a story. Maybe some of the lads will pick up some useful tidbits they can use in their own life. And the Lord and all these guys, by the way, who are in this dojo are dicks. Like they're all very smug and arrogant. Like even then, he's like, this may be amusing, and sort of like twisting his moustache and giggling to himself. So he starts telling the story of how he came to be. But he instantly drops the bomb that he did know the fella in the story.
The fellow who killed himself with the bamboo, yeah.
いささか拙者の存じよりのものであってな。
Which is interesting because these sort of movies where it's kind of like an unfolding reveal, you'd think that particular detail would come much later.
Yes, I thought.
You think he would tell the whole story and then be like, and that man was.
I thought what would happen is, he'd get into like a huge battle and they'd be like, what's going on? And then, well, I thought he was going to like kill the main scumbag guy, and then like because you get that in these sort of films, he's like, why do you want this revenge against me so much? And he's like, blah 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 was my
you're expecting the Luke, I am your father.
Essentially
at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
but that's revealed pretty early on. But to be fair, he's not. Like he ain't coming to Harakiri himself.
Yeah.
Or if he is, there's something else up his sleeve. So he's like, they send off for the other fella, and he tells them the story that basically he used to be part of another clan, but it became destitute, and they had to go off, and his best friend had to kill himself for honour, and as a result, he adopted his son. So him and this man's son, who he's adopted, and his daughter go off, and he's telling them all this, and there's these details and whatever, and you're like, okay, cool. But then the guy that's been sent off comes back, and he's like, oh, he's too ill. He won't even see me. He says he doesn't want to be seen right now because he's too sick. So the fella's like, listen, like we had a look. He's not well.
Yeah.
You got to pick someone else. And he's like, okay, how about this fella?
Yeah.
And he picks another name, and they check, and they're like, oh, he's been ill for a
whispering, and then they're like,
he's
ill.
And then he picks a third name, and he kind of says, surely he can't be ill too. And he does it with like a nod.
Yeah, his eyes are like, Surely.
He does,
Can't
he
be.
does the Dwayne Johnson eyebrow
Yeah,
lift.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
hello.
妙なことも
You smell.
So you're like, but what's good here is as well is I like the way he reveals these things, where all the characters are as clued in as you. No one's like, what is going on? I don't understand. Immediately, the head of the dojo walks into the back with his main little advisors,
Main little servant, yeah.
and he's like, what's going on here? He's pulling some sort of dirty trick. But at the same time, the policy of there is once you show up and you say you want to do Harakiri, they not only oblige you, they make you see it through. So he thinks there's some sort of trick, but he's not worried because as far as he can see, the result's going to end up the same. But he's a little unnerved by this at this point. And also he's thinking like, has he done something to my men?
Yeah, he's thinking like, why is everyone that he's saying sick? So he's like,
I was thinking at this point, he's poisoned them.
yeah, I was thinking that as well, to be fair.
And if you think that, then you don't know this beggar. Right? He is an absolute fucking G.
弱い者
So at this point, he starts really racking on the pressure for the Lord. Keeps racking on the pressure for him to just like, come on, just do Harakiri, blah blah blah. And he keeps telling his story because he's like, I want to. You should send off for the other two men. I want to see what the deal is, blah blah blah. So he goes on with his story, and he starts talking about how when they first came to this region, and his daughter grew up, and his adopted son grew up, and there was high up lords and dukes who were kind of trying to vie for her marriage, but he was like, he didn't want that. He didn't want to just, and part of it was also that would open up a lot of doors to as well, because they were not beggars, but they were poor. They were very poor. They were on the bottom of the ladder basically, and marrying off his daughter to a rich whatever opened a lot of doors. But he had no interest in it. He wanted her to marry a good person for love. And he knew his adopted son and her were in love. And he really respected the man he was and he loved him. So he arranged for them to marry. So they marry. And it's a cool ceremony actually as well. I liked when he was like the swan that lives 1,000 years. The turtle that lives 10,000 years. Like, it's
that
just
was quite cool.
Japanese culture.
It's better than an English wedding. The priest just drones on you like, why can't we have this?
It was really cool.
Yeah, it was.
But so that's unfolding and things are all good, and even better, a son comes along, so everything's great in this flashback. So you're wondering, how the fuck do you end up wanting to commit suicide? What's going on?
Yeah.
So we see the story progressing, and his daughter starts to get ill.
Yes.
And then not too long after,
the son gets ill.
the wee little baby's getting ill as well, which really fucking...
Which is sad, and bearing in mind,
sucked.
they're still kind of like looking for jobs this whole time. So you see the adopted son like go to what looks like a building site and beg for a job. They turn him away. All of this, so obviously with them getting sick...
But they turn him away specifically because he's a former samurai.
Yes, that's true.
Because it's seen as too lowly work
for
a samurai, but even though the samurai can't get any work.
And all this time, unfortunately, they have no money, so therefore they can't pay for a doctor or medical treatment for the wife or the son, so they're in a very dire, straight situation. And
the beggar, he cares about his family above all else, but he sold everything, he's done everything he can. One thing he hasn't sold is his samurai sword.
Yes.
Without his knowledge, his adopted son's already pawned off his own personal samurai swords and longsword and broadsword. And so they literally have no money left at all. So they're desperate. Don't know what to do. Don't know how to do it. It gets to the point where they're both on the daughter and the adopted son's wife and the child are on death's door. So the son suddenly gets this idea and he says, I remember a lender who will possibly give us the money for a doctor. Let me go get him. And they say, go off, go off, go off. Be back soon.
Yeah.
But he doesn't go off to Elenda. He goes off to the dojo because he had heard the stories about people going and doing that little hustle in order to get the money.
Which I think the beggar told him. The beggar told him, and you cut back to the sequence, and they have a discussion where they're like, we must not get desperate for employment. We must pick the right job. And then it kind of all
but then you see
goes full circle. Basically, unfortunately, because of they have no choice, literally.
They have no choice. And unfortunately, that night, because they're wondering, where are they? And that night, the lords and the other samurai from the dojo bring the body of the adopted son, and they bring him to the house, and they lay him down, and they arrogantly and smugly...
They're laughing, literally, they're laughing.
Yeah, they're just, like, I don't know if they're completely laughing, but they're just so smugly saying, isn't it a great honour? What a man of integrity, and saying everything with, like, a wink and a nod. And at this point, I was thinking, I can't wait till the beggar fucking kills all of you fuckers.
They even get the sword, basically, and said, this guy, he's coming with bamboo swords. So the beggar goes, you must have swapped it for one of your ones then. And they were like, no, we made him do it with a bamboo. And what a scene it was for the whole court. What honour. And then I was like, fucking bastards, like, just like you. I was like... And what I really liked about this scene, Declan, the way the film set it up, the way in the opening sequence he goes there, and unbeknownst to him, he already knows this story, and they make the adopted son look like such a pussy at the start of it, because he's like, 2 days grace, and I was sitting there thinking, what a mug, like.
Yeah.
And then when you actually know the reason, I thought that the film done it so well.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
It is devastating knowing how desperate he was, and how awful a fate that must have been, knowing he would never get to see his child, who were probably going to die, and they do die. The wife dies the following day, and the day after. Sorry, the son dies the following day, and the wife dies the day after. And the beggar is left completely alone in the world.
Do you think I think they called it the council, the dojo council would call it. Do you think they done it for their entertainment, this whole Harakiri thing? Because this guy does try to run away, but they're like, either we cut you down like a dog or you go back and carry it out. Do you think it's actually to do with the whole honour thing?
It's absolutely.
Now that you've said it, you've got to do it, basically. Or now you've turned up.
It is absolutely about honour.
Oh, fair enough.
And I'm actually going to come to what I think about that at the end.
Okay.
Because this is a movie that, interestingly, for how much I took away this being a movie about themes, it doesn't actually reveal what its themes really are until the last 20-30 minutes of a 2-hour 15-minute movie. This is quite a long film. So he reveals all that, and you think, well, he's come here to fucking kill everyone. And he hasn't. He says he understands that it was a shameful, stupid, unforgivable thing to do, to come and try and hustle some money by pretending you want to do a Harakiri. And he doesn't want to take their heads back to... And he also has come here today intending to do Harakiri.
Yeah, because he
has.
He says at the start, because they tell him the whole story about this, and the beggar kind of goes, no, I'm telling you now, I have every intention of dying today.
And he does.
Yeah, he does.
But when he goes to meet his family in the afterlife, he needs to be able to go and tell them that he did his best, or he needs something to bring to him.
Honoured you, yeah.
And all he wants from him, not even really an apology, he wants them to just say, yeah, we fucked up. We should. Yeah. When he said he wanted to go home, which we now know he wasn't. He probably would have come back. His intention was to go home and make his arrangements for his family. But he said, you should have at least found out.
Yeah.
You should have at least... You shouldn't have made him use his bamboo sticks. You should have given him real blades.
They should have been like... Basically, what he said was, when you found out that he bought bamboo swords, like, why did you come here with these? If they just asked him that question, it could have turned out, and he told them, the reason I've come here is because my family are sick, we have no money. Do you think they would have given him the money out of sympathy? Or do you think they would have still made him commit the Harakiri just because he's turned up?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And one of them, to be fair, one of them was like, well, it's annoying, but of course we're going to have to give him money and to send him on his way. He wanted nothing
Yeah, he
to do
did.
with it.
And they was like, no, we can't
They were like,
do it.
no, we can't be
because
doing that.
They're going to keep turning up.
So he's revealed that. All he wants is them to admit they went about it wrong.
Yeah.
And they won't do it.
The beggar just turns around and basically says, you know, you bang on about honor in this dojo, but I've hunted down 3 of they're counselors as well, aren't they?
Samurai.
Samurai. I've hunted down 3 of your best master swordsmen. I haven't even killed them. I've just taken off, like, on the top of their head, their top knots. So he then gets them out of his bag that he's carrying, throws them out one by one, and in this time period, for a samurai to lose their top knot by another man is seen as one of the most dishonourable things you can do.
Like a dwarf losing their beard.
Yeah.
And
nobody chucks the dwarf.
And we see it in these beautiful, really just so ahead of their time, directed scenes.
Yes.
The way they tell these flashbacks
Yes.
and show him stalking these 3 guys individually, and the final one, which I said last week, is my favourite martial arts fight of all time, where they go up to the woods and up to the
through a graveyard, a beautiful graveyard.
They go up to the field and they have this really slow, graceful, beautiful sword fight. And he breaks his sword in 2 and cuts his top knot off. And he says an interesting thing as well, where he talks about essentially that this guy had never truly had a fight in a genuine, real life warlike setting.
Yeah, because this guy is the last samurai that he goes to hunt.
Yeah, last of 3.
And obviously, the other 2 are alive, aren't they? So the other 2 have probably have pre-warned him, as he said, because he says, the beggar, I was at a bit of a loss because he was the hardest, because the other 2 have pre-warned him that I was coming, and he just turns up at the beggar's kind of house to, like, murder him, I guess, without, like...
Well, he challenges him to a duel.
And then the beggar says, essentially, this is no place for a duel, can we go? And that it is so beautiful, the way they go through a graveyard to an opening, and it's in black and white, which obviously at the time there was no colour, but I think it just makes it all the more beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know, it's stunning.
Absolutely.
Like, there's one shot that I can remember, Declan, going back to what you said about it being, like, technically so good for the time. There's one shot, I don't know if it's before or after it starts. I think it's before, when it was like serene, before where it just focuses on the grass, like, blowing like that, and I was like, that is stunning.
It's amazing. But it's an interesting point he makes, that because they've never actually, when he's talking about he's never actually seen battle, none of these guys have. Like, part of the reason all these samurais are beggars and poor, because all the beggars that had gone and previously tried to do the Harakiri hustle, that's a good name, isn't it? The Harakiri hustle, they were all former samurai, and it's because this is peace times.
Yeah.
And this is a young dojo. All the guys are young, and the lord of this dojo is very young, much younger than the beggar. None of them have ever seen battle.
No.
And that will become important for my final point when we're talking about the themes of the movie. Anyway, so he's taken off all their top knots, throws them on the floor, and he basically is like, what now, bitch? So all the guys, he gives the signal to attack.
So annoyed, obviously. He's like...
Oh, he's infuriated.
You would be.
And he's infuriated because his ideology is being fucked with. His best men were not ill. They were hiding at home in shame because their top knots had been removed.
Yeah.
And he's furious.
He's furious. And then we get to now, the last battle. What you said, the lead counsellor goes in, and you're thinking, as the audience member, as the watcher, now we're gonna get to see a fucking scrap. Like, it's kind of like leading up to it, and you know it's gonna happen at one point, because either the beggar commits Harakiri or whatever you call it, or he fights all of them. So you're like, now he's gonna have to fight all of them. He goes in, and it's brilliant. You don't see it as Declan said. You just hear the swords clashing. And then it kind of cuts back to where he is fighting. And if you haven't seen this, obviously go and watch it. But he's so outnumbered, so you kind of know there's no way, unless it's like James Bond or something, where he can like kill everyone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's really cool how the action, because I like when it cuts back, like you said, he's already sweating.
Yeah, he's already struggling.
A couple of guys, one guy's already dead. A couple of guys are already wounded. He's already a bit wounded, and everyone's tense as fuck. People are kind of, there's these moments of 3 seconds of action where the things are flying, spears are throwing, and then it's stop again, and people are kind of, it's a standoff. And what I like is the physics and the physical capabilities of a person are really grounded in this.
Yeah,
like he is keeping people away, but he's keeping people away in that kind of manic swinging a sword around way. He's not really hurting anyone, but it's not quite worth it for them to go in closer. So you believe he's holding them off, and he's running a lot of the time. Like, he's legging it. He kills a couple of them, but he's running through. You know, it's these old Japanese feudal times. You know, the walls aren't really walls. Yeah, the walls are like those weird sort of half paper, half little bit of wood things. Yeah. So he's just pushing them over, running. He's sweating. He's freaking out, and he takes out 4 men, wounds about 8 others. And then he sees this, as he's running through the corridors, he sees this Japanese samurai suit
of armour.
This samurai suit of armour that's sitting up inside a cast. And he sees it and he picks it up. And this is, by the way, like their most honoured possession. And kind of the symbol of the samurai culture that they have devoted their life to, they're obsessed with. But in the truest sense, because they've grown up in peace times, never truly experienced firsthand. It's a belief system rather than a true life experience at this point.
Yeah. And
he picks it up and he smashes it on the floor.
And that everyone's like,
what
everyone knows that's fucking it now. Yeah. Literally, like.
And the Lord, the dick, he orders them to shoot him. So rather than killing him by the broadsword, they get out guns and shoot him dead. Go.
But before that, he knows that they've got the guns, I think. So he carries himself. So he's done his bit and like just pulls it across. But they didn't even have in this fucking dojo thing the courage to even then fighting by the sword. They had to shoot him from long range. I was like, scumbags.
Sorry, go.
When I first saw the suit of armour, I thought this geezer's going to put it on and like just burst out and start.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. I was like, this is going to be like, you know, like Fistful of Dollars. When they're shooting with the I was like, is this where it came from?
It's like, hey, Rascal, what's that guy called again?
But that would have ruined the whole aspect of the film if he put the armour on and just started messing them up.
But to be fair, like, it hadn't truly revealed its cards yet.
Yeah.
You learn in the next 20 minutes what this movie is really about.
Exactly.
So, our hero is now dead. he hasn't got his revenge on the Lord. He's only actually killed 4 men and wounded about 8 others. And you see the servant who was sent off to inspect the other 2 men who had been hiding away because apparently they were sick, but we now know their top knots were actually taken. He returns and he tells them the story. He basically explains to them that they're not actually sick, blah, blah, blah. So immediately the Lord says, all right, well, tell them all to commit Harakiri at once.
Yeah.
And the 4 men that were killed today, they have it known that they died of sickness. Yeah. And make sure that 8 men who are wounded are seen by doctors straight away. And because we can't have any more die of sickness, air quotes. And the servant's even a bit like, oh, really? Like, that seems a bit fucked up. And he's like, get out, you mug. Yeah. And they leave him alone. And you see that this movie is all about the bullshit of honouring a military ideology and holding your life to that. That's what this film is all about. It's about the ideas of honour and integrity. And what does that really mean? Who has the integrity in this movie? Is it these dicks who have never even known the true life of a samurai, who have never actually experienced warfare, and they don't base their belief system on these things they've experienced for real in real life, but on this old mystified idea of what it means to be a samurai. And as we know, these things, it's kind of like when old Brexiteer type people are like, oh, the old days of the empire when Britain was great. It's like, really, you think it was great? I guarantee you it wasn't great unless you were one of about a handful of people.
When they enslaved like hundreds of people across the Commonwealth.
Enslaved themselves as well. You think fucking a Cockney or whatever, rocking around in Sheffield or up north or whatever was doing good. It was never good, comparatively to today. Yeah. But this is the problem. And you see the beggar... he's written off as, he just showed up, he wanted to do Harakiri, we obliged him. 4 guys died of sickness, another 3 guys died of Harakiri for unknown reasons.
Yeah, how are you supposed to explain that?
And that, most importantly, that's what goes down in the record book.
Oh, you're right.
And the shogun, the high supreme general of all of Japan, writes him a letter based on the account that they've revealed to the public and congratulates him. And says, you know, I can't believe, I would love to meet you in person. You have such integrity. This is brilliant how you oversaw the whole thing. And you see that not only has his ideology come crashing down, but rather than accepting it, he's doubled down on it. And the cycle is going to continue because the official count that will go out and inspire future people like him is bullshit.
Yeah.
And that is the cycle of the movie, and that is the big problem. And our hero doesn't get to win, our hero doesn't get his revenge, our hero gets completely fucked over. But he is the one who died with honour. He knew what was really important in life, and it wasn't a code of ethics about, you got to do this and you got to do that, and, you know, if something goes wrong, kill yourself or you're a piece of shit. Yeah. No, it's, he says... My adopted son came here and you butchered him like a pig with bamboo sticks. Didn't even give him his blades. And why? Because he dared to try and hustle some money in the good name of the samurai code. But he did that all and risked death and ended up dying because he was desperate to protect his family. And he, the beggar, did all this just because he wanted them to admit that they did it wrong, that they fucked up, and they shouldn't have done what they did the way they did it. He doesn't even he accepts that he had to do Harakiri, his son, once he said it. Yeah, he's not even going there, but he's like, it's the way you did it. It's not what you did. It's how you did it, and it just, when it leaves you there looking, the movie closes zooming into that same suit of armor that's now been put back up. But it's empty. There is no man in it. Yeah. It's an empty cast within it. And that is just visually the perfect way to end the movie.
Yeah, I think out of all the people in this film, the adopted son had the most honour.
Yeah.
Because I know he went there. I know he went there to essentially swindle them, but if you're ever in that situation where you're so desperate and you love people that much, I think to like go through to do it with the bamboo and stuff, it was just like the most honourable. And I like him because he was seen as the coward at the start, but when you actually realise about him, he had more honour than any of these scumbags that were in the council, like, and that's what made it great.
And it's interesting about ideology is a lot of the time, like, forget ideology even for a second, like a belief system, it can be a great... Terence McKenna used to say, like, you know, culture is the operating system for our minds. And it's a beautiful way of putting it because, you know, there's a lot of things that can be wrong with belief systems and they become outdated. And because our modern lives, you know, modern civilization moves so much quicker than it used to, these things become outdated quicker. But there's a lot to be said for a set of rules that can help you navigate life.
Yeah.
But it's a problem when you take it too seriously, and not to get too pretentious on you, but it reminds me of an old sort of Buddhist story where there's an elderly Buddhist monk and a young Buddhist monk, and they're walking along the beach, and eventually they see this woman who's coming in on a small boat, but she doesn't want to get wet because when she has to get out of the boat because it's on the shore.
Yeah.
So the monk walks over and puts her on her back and carries her to shore and puts her down. They say their goodbyes and thank yous and they go their separate ways. An hour later, or a few hours later, the young monk can't help himself anymore, so he finally says, "Master, you know, we're not supposed to... Our laws and beliefs decree that we're not supposed to touch a woman with our bare skin, but yet you just did it. And like, why did you carry her?" And the older monk says, "I only carried her a few feet. You're the one who's carried her this way, this far." True.
Yeah.
And it's it is perfect because it just for what sounds at first like it's going to be a really over the top and pretentious philosophical point, actually is super simple, where it's like yeah, I know we have our belief systems and that's the, you know, what we base our lives around, but sometimes you got to fucking help a woman get out of a boat.
Yeah.
That's just it, and that's reality, and you can't be so down to the letter of the law. That doesn't make you a better person. These belief systems are, you know, operating systems for navigating life, but it's what you do in between those guidelines that is integrity and honour.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to moral choice, like weighing stuff up on the spot. Like, you can read all these religious textures, but it can't really... yeah, as you said, it can give you the foundations, but there's always going to be something in life that pops up that makes you question your beliefs, and that's when the morals come into play.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So, Harakiri is an absolute easy recommendation. This is a fantastic movie. If you're put off by a black and white movie or a movie from the 60s or 50s, don't worry. This movie will have so much to offer you. It is such a slick, modern, ahead of its time, stylistically and well-directed film. It is incredible. The story is amazing. The way it unfolds is amazing. When it finally gets to the action is not just beautifully done, but so interestingly done. Really takes a different approach than 99% of other action or fight scenes in movies usually. And all in all, it is easily one of the greatest Japanese movies ever made, and one of the greatest movies ever made. And for me, probably in terms of a movie that explores the themes of honour and ideology, maybe the best film ever made. So it's an easy recommendation for Harakiri.
This is the Filmy McFilm Film Show.